Yo, what's going on guys? CallxMeVapor here, and welcome back to the video. So in today's video, we're going to be going over what style you should be using in Haikyuu Legends. Now this is going to be an in-depth video of where I show you which style you should use for which style you want to play. So if you want to be a setter, I'm going to show you what you should use for a setter. If you want to be a spiker, I'm going to show you what you want to be for a spiker. Now if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's get right into the video. Also, if you don't already know, I am doing a 2v2 league. This is $200, so if you want to join, make sure to join in the description below. Now for this video, we're not going to be covering anything like the uncommons or the rares because these are really bad styles and they really shouldn't be covered because you shouldn't be using them. So we're essentially going to start off with the legendaries and work our way up towards the secrets. Now for the first style we're going to be going over Azamina. Now Azamina is a very washed down version of Uchishima. So if you want to have a legendary with a better skill set, then you're going to be wanting to use Uchishima. But Azamina is a good backup if you can't roll anything else. So Azamina is always a good one to have in a backup slot. Now we're moving on to Sagafura. Now Sagafura is a pretty good receiver because he has max speed, but he's also not the best in spiking or serving. Now this is important to know because when you're playing 2v2s or 3v3s, you're not going to be wanting to use Sagafura because he's not going to be able to do much. So if you're playing 66s and you want a Libero, Sagafura is a good pick because he has the max in both columns that you're going to be using the majority of the time. For the other columns such as block, jump, and spike, he is very low, one of the lowest in the games. So you're not going to be wanting to use him in 2v2s or 3v3s, but he is definitely a very good pick in 6v6s and big team ratios. So now we're moving on to Kosumi. Kosumi is one of the worst in the entire game because his skill set does not match up at all. So I highly recommend just not even using him. If you roll him, make sure to roll off because he is completely useless. There really isn't much else to say. He has a max bump, which is pretty much one of the most useless stats in the game to have. He isn't a good Libero because he has half speed. So really, you should just not use this guy at all. So now we're moving on to Yabu. Yabu is a pretty controversial pick because he does have max speed and max jump, and he also does have max block. His spike is very low and his serve is one of the lowest in the game. So it's pretty controversial. In my opinion, I think that Yabu is a okay pick. I don't think that he is the best you can have, so I recommend rolling him off. In my opinion, he's about a 5 out of 10 on a 10 scale. He does have a pretty high dive, so that makes up a ton of points. He is a pretty good Libero pick if you wanted to use him for a Libero. Once again, he is a pretty bad pick if you're playing like 2v2s or 3v3s. And yeah, if you were playing a 1v1, this is probably one of the worst players you could pick. So now we're moving on to Yamamoto. Yamamoto is also one of the worst in the entire game. If you plan on using Yamamoto, you will most likely lose your games because he's very relatable to Kosumi. He doesn't have really anything going for him. All of his stat points kind of work against each other, so he has a high dive and a high bump, but his speed is so low that this is pretty much useless. And he has like a 3/4 spike, but his jump is so bad that you can't really do anything with him. So I highly recommend not using him at all, and this should help you a lot in winning games if you don't use him. So the next one we're going to move on to is Kuzee. So Kuzee is a very good pick in my opinion. He has one of the lowest speeds in the game, but this definitely is countered by his big jump and his big block, and he also has a very high spike. So this helps out a lot. He also has a very high serve, which makes up for a ton of points because when you're playing against bad players, you're going to be able to ace a lot of the time when you have a higher level spike because it's going to be faster and they're going to be harder to react to. Kuzee is definitely a good pick. I do believe Uchishima is much better than him, essentially in all ways, but he definitely is a good pick. In my opinion, I do believe he is the second best legendary in the game. So the next one we're going to be going over is Uchishima. Uchishima is by far the best legendary in the entire game because he has been the highest spike and the highest jump and the very good speed and block for a very long time. They tried to nerf him because he was so good, and then they eventually had to revert it because he became too bad. So Uchishima is definitely one of the best legendaries that you're going to be wanting to use. It's also very good because his bump and his serve are very high compared to what his jump, block, and spike are. So if you want to use a very well-rounded, good legendary, then I recommend Uchishima because he's very similar to Sanu. Sanu is going to be an all-rounder in every column that you can have, so once again, highly recommend Uchishima that you use him. Butoku is very similar to Uchishima, but in my opinion, I do believe Uchishima is a little bit better just because of the speed difference from Uchishima and Butoku. But Butoku is definitely one of the most similar to Uchishima and Sanu. He does have max block, jump, and spike, but his speed is very, very low. So in my opinion, I don't think that he's one of the best you can use. But in high team ratios, I definitely think that he can be very good to use. Example, you're using a 6v6 and you're on a wing spiker. It's going to be very easy for you to just sit there and max spike everything because you don't have to move around much. So in my opinion, I think Butoku is a very good pick for high ratios, but I think you'll be better off using Uchishima for ratios like 2v2 and 3v3s and also 1v1s. So now we're moving into our very first setter that's going to be very useful in the game. Kageyama is definitely one of the best in the entire game because of his sets. It's very important to remember that 2v2 and 3v3, you're not going to be wanting to use Kageyama because he's going to not be as useful because of his spike and his bumps that are very low. For example, if your team sets to you and you have to spike the ball, then you're going to be just, kind of hitting a little like pea shooter at the other team. So it's important to not be doing that. If you're a setter on a ratio such as like a 4v4 or a 6v6, it's one of the most useful in the game because his sets are going to be very fast and efficient, and it's going to be very fast for the other team to receive. So if you're going to be a setter in the game for a team, if you're playing a league or something, you're going to be wanting to use Kageyama because that set is max and it's going to be very, very fast to defend. So now we're moving on to Oikawa. Oikawa is, in my opinion, the worst of all of the mythics because, simply put, his skills work against each other. He has a max serve and a max jump, but his spike is so low and his speed is only half that he doesn't really fall into the column of a spiker. Now you can make the argument that he's a setter, but in my opinion, that set is still not fully maxed, so he doesn't really beat Kageyama in that. And also Kageyama's set is the same, is greater than Oikawa's, but his spike is much higher. So in my opinion, I think that Kageyama is going to be a better pick if you want to play Oikawa, and if you wanted to play Oikawa for a spiker, you'd be better off using Uchishima or Butoku. In my opinion, Oikawa shouldn't be used, but that is your choice. So now we're going to move into the Sanu. Sanu is definitely the best spiker in the game, just simply because of the tilt extra skill that he has. The tilt makes it so that you can wiggle your ball that you spike into the court every single time and you're going to be able to score. You're not going to really be hitting it out of bounds much. And also his block, jump, and spike are completely maxed, and that speed is still pretty high compared to how good of a spiker he is. In my opinion, I think that you're going to be wanting to use him on every single ratio. And I think that he also rivals time skip Hinoto a little bit. All of his stats are very well put together. Although he does have a very low serve, if you're playing in a competitive scenario, you're not going to really be able to ace much, so serving is not really that important because serving is very easy to defend in this game if you're a good player. And also he has a very high dive compared to his skill set as a spiker, so just remember that Sanu is definitely one of the best in the game, if not the best, and yeah. So now we're moving into our final style, which is time skip Hinoto. So if you wanted to use time skip Hinoto, then you're definitely thinking in the right direction because jump, speed, and spike is all maxed on this guy. So that's just one of the most broken things that you can have in the game right now is the max speed with a max spike, because you're going to be able to move around the court very, very fast while also being able to spike at full power. It's also important to remember that his serve is very high for some reason, because in the show he's not a very good server, so not sure why that's a thing. I think that serve needs to get bumped down a lot. He also has a half block, which is pretty important because the blocking isn't really that important when you have a high block, but it definitely does help to have a little bit in that column. And he does, so he has a half in the block column, and he also has a half in the set column, so he can be used as a pretty good setter too. So it's important to remember that time skip Hinoto is going to be one of the best that you can use in 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s, 5v5s, and 6v6s. In my opinion, I do think that he is the best that you can use in the entire game, but he also is the hardest to get in the entire game, because he does come out of the shop in about 7 days, and you're never going to be able to get him again. So just remember that time skip Hinoto and Sanu, as well as Uchishima, are definitely the top 3 that you're going to want to be using. And yeah, if you're looking at these styles and you wanted to get one but you don't know how, so just make sure to go check out my other video. I do show you how to get secrets very quick in Haikyuu Legends. Other than that, that's really all I have for this video. I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you guys found a style that you want to use. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.